Rain pelted down on the cracked sidewalk as Roman Rivers gripped his daughter's tiny hand, his jacket soaked through, his worn work boots splashing through puddles. "Daddy, you're squeezing too tight," little Clara said, her voice small, her curly brown hair plastered to her forehead. "Sorry, sweetheart," Roman muttered, loosening his grip. He was too focused on keeping her safe from the mess of traffic ahead to notice much else. The crossing light blinked red. Horns blared. His stomach growled. Payday was Friday, still 2 days away, and the last can of soup had already been split between them last night. But then everything exploded. A silver car screeched across the curb, tires shrieking, hydroplaning straight toward the intersection. Roman's heart stopped. A woman tall, elegant, in a white coat and heels was frozen on the corner, her umbrella flipping inside out in the wind. The car swerved straight for her. Roman didn't think. He shoved Clara behind him, bolted into the street, and tackled the woman just in time, the car missing them by inches before slamming into a lamppost. Screams echoed, glass shattered. Roman rolled onto his back, chest heaving, soaked and breathless. The woman blinked at him, stunned, her face inches from his. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide and blue striking, startlingly beautiful. "You okay?" Roman asked, his voice rough. She nodded, breath hitching. You saved me." A crowd gathered, sirens wailed in the distance, but Roman only had eyes for Clara, who was hugging his leg, crying. "I'm fine, baby," he said, scooping her up. The woman sat up slowly, brushing wet hair from her face. "You didn't even hesitate. I saw a car coming. You weren't moving. What else was I supposed to do?" he said, hoisting Clara higher on his hip. Her eyes lingered on him, like she was trying to figure something out. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He glanced at her ruined umbrella, her designer heels now soaked and scuffed. "You should get out of the rain before you catch a cold." Clara tugged on his jacket. "Daddy, she's really pretty." Roman groaned under his breath. "Clara." The woman laughed softly, her lips curving up. "She's right."
"I'm Tessa Alden."
"Roman," he said reluctantly. "This is Clara." Tessa looked down at the girl, her gaze softening.
Clara.
"You're brave. Just like your dad." Roman gave a tight smile. "Come on, kiddo. We need to catch the bus." "Wait," Tessa said, standing up with a wince.
"Please.
Let me at least call you a ride. Or buy you dinner. Something." He shook his head. "We're fine. But I have to get her home. She hasn't eaten yet." Tessa's brows pulled together. She looked down at Clara again, and then back at him. "Where do you live?" Roman hesitated. 30 minutes by bus. South Side. "I'll drive you." Before he could protest, she added, "It's the least I can do." Roman didn't want to accept, but Clara looked at him with pleading eyes, and his legs were aching from the double shift he'd pulled at the warehouse. "All right," he muttered. The car that pulled up moments later wasn't just a car, it was a sleek black SUV, spotless, with a suited driver who jumped out and opened the doors. Roman blinked. Tessa slid in like it was nothing. Roman sat stiffly, Clara curled against him, her eyes wide at the leather seats and glowing ceiling lights. You don't seem like you're from around my part of town," Roman said, watching Tessa from the corner of his eye. "I'm not," she answered simply. "Nice car." "It's my assistant's." She was lying. Roman could tell. Her coat alone probably cost more than his rent. But she didn't act stuck up. She didn't flinch when Clara leaned into her to ask what the buttons on the door did. She answered every question with a gentle smile. When they pulled up outside his apartment, a crumbling brick building with flickering hallway lights, Tessa looked up at it, then turned to him. "Are you sure I can't buy you dinner?" Roman nodded. "We've got soup." "I owe you more than soup." "You don't owe me anything." He opened the door, then paused. But thanks.
I meant it, she said.
You saved my life. He lifted Clara out of the car and turned to shut the door. Roman, he looked back. Would it be crazy if I asked to see you again? He blinked.
Why?
Her smile was small, nervous. Because you're the first real person I've met in a long time. And I'd like to return the favor. Maybe buy you both a real dinner? Roman hesitated. Please, she added. Clara tugged on his sleeve. Can we? Roman sighed. All right. One dinner. Tessa's smile lit up her whole face. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 6. Roman nodded slowly.
Deal.
She watched him carry Clara up the stairs and didn't look away until the door shut behind them. The next evening, when Tessa arrived, she didn't come in another SUV. She rang the buzzer herself, standing there in a navy coat and jeans, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and a little teddy bear. Clara squealed when she saw her. You came?
Tessa laughed.
Of course I did. You ready for that dinner? The restaurant she took them to wasn't just nice, it was a rooftop place with white tablecloths, chandeliers, and a string quartet. Roman stared at the menu like it was written in another language. Clara had her own kids' menu, and Tessa ordered her a fancy pink drink with fruit on the rim. Why are you doing this? Roman asked quietly while Clara colored on her placemat. Tessa's gaze met his. Because I want to. You don't even know me. I know you threw yourself in front of a car for a stranger. I know you're a good dad. And I know I haven't stopped thinking about you since yesterday. Roman sat back, unsure how to respond. Tessa reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Let me thank you, Roman. Not with money. With time. With dinner. With getting to know you. He looked down at her hand, then back at her eyes. All right. But just dinner. Tessa smiled. For now. And for the first time in years, Roman let himself smile too. Roman adjusted the too tight collar of the shirt Tessa had bought him. It wasn't new, just something she'd picked up from a second-hand boutique on their third dinner outing, saying the color brought out his eyes. He hadn't known what to say then, just like he didn't know what to say now as he stood in the lobby of a towering glass building that stretched into the clouds. This is where you work? He asked, glancing up at the polished marble walls and the massive chandelier that looked like it belonged in a castle. Tessa nodded, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. Only when I can't avoid it. He glanced sideways at her. So why bring me here? Because I wanted you to see where I spend most of my days.
And?
She paused on the word, like it tasted strange coming out. Because there's a charity event tonight. I'm supposed to give a speech. You're my date. Roman blinked. Tessa, I'm wearing a shirt that still smells like lavender from some stranger's closet. You look incredible, she said without hesitation. He folded his arms. I don't fit in with these people. You think I do? She asked quietly, stepping closer. I grew up above a bakery, Roman. My mother used to sew patches into my school uniforms. This world, these people, it's not where I started. He studied her face carefully, noting the way her voice thinned at the mention of her past. It wasn't something she talked about often, not in the few weeks they'd known each other. He was learning to listen between the lines. So, what changed it? He asked. My father died when I was 16. Left behind shares in a company he helped found but never managed. My name got added to a boardroom table I didn't ask to sit at.
The rest
just kept happening. Before he could respond, a tall man in a tuxedo strolled over, drink in hand, eyes narrowing as he took in Roman's presence beside her.
Tessa.
You're late, the man said pointedly. I wasn't aware I reported to you, Conrad, she replied coolly. You're on in 10 minutes. The board's watching. Conrad's gaze shifted to Roman, and his expression soured. And this is? My guest, Tessa answered. Roman extended a hand. Roman Rivers. Conrad looked at it like it was covered in dirt. He didn't take it. I'll see you inside, Conrad muttered, turning sharply. Roman exhaled. Friendly guy. He's the CFO. He thinks he runs the place. Roman watched as other men in tailored suits brushed past him without a glance. He's not the only one. Tessa took his hand. Ignore them. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't pretend. Inside the ballroom, golden light shimmered from dozens of crystal fixtures. Waiters circled with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres Roman couldn't name. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. He leaned toward her. You sure this speech thing isn't a mistake? Tessa laughed under her breath. You're the only reason I'm not bolting out the back door. She stepped onto the stage 10 minutes later, her voice even, her posture perfect. But Roman could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the edge of the podium when she started speaking. I'm not the kind of person who likes microphones, she began. But I care about this cause. I care about the people it helps. And I care about remembering where I came from. Roman's chest tightened. Across the room, people nodded politely, clapped at the right moments, but only he seemed to hear the tremor in her voice when she mentioned her mother's long nights baking bread to pay rent. Back at their table, he poured her a glass of water when she returned. She took it with a grateful look. You were good, he said. I was terrified. You didn't look it. She leaned back, exhaling. I always do what's expected. Tonight felt different. He ran a thumb along the edge of his glass. That's because you weren't performing. You were being real. Her gaze lingered on him. You always see straight through everything, don't you? He shrugged. Not always. Took me a while to figure out you weren't just some woman who got lucky avoiding a car. She tilted her head. And now I think you're someone who's been pretending not to be lonely. Tessa didn't respond for a long moment. Then she said, There's something I should tell you. Roman waited. I didn't plan to see you after that night. I told myself I'd say thank you and move on. But I kept thinking about you. About Clara. Your laugh. Your hands when you helped me up. I didn't know what to do with that. Roman set his glass down carefully. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do. Because I've never done this before. Not like this. Not with someone who doesn't want anything from me. He looked at her. You think I don't want anything? Her breath caught. Do you? I want to know who you are when all this isn't around. When there's no stage. No tuxedos. Just you. Her eyes shimmered. Then come with me. She stood, tugged him by the hand, and led him through a side hallway, past a heavy door and onto a terrace that overlooked the city. The air was cool, the lights of downtown twinkling below like stars scattered across asphalt. I used to sneak up here when I first started, she said. It was the only place that didn't feel like I was drowning. Roman stepped beside her. The wind ruffled his shirt. You don't have to drown anymore. Tessa turned to him, her voice low. I don't want to go back inside. He moved closer. Then don't. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want this to end. Roman reached up and brushed her hair back from her face. Then it won't. She didn't look away as she closed the space between them. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, like neither of them wanted to break whatever fragile thing was building between them. But then it deepened, the world falling quiet except for the wind and the beating of two hearts that hadn't found peace in a long time. When they pulled apart, Tessa rested her forehead against his. I'm scared of what this means. Roman held her there. So am I. But I don't want to run from it.
Then don't, he said again.
And for the first time in years, she didn't. The wind had picked up by the time Roman and Tessa stepped off the terrace, but neither of them noticed. Back inside, the ballroom had changed. People were on their feet, clapping for a jazz trio that had replaced the string quartet. Waiters swept past with fresh trays, and laughter echoed off the marble. Roman looked to Tessa. Do we have to go back in? She gave a soft shake of her head.
No.
I've already done more than they expected. They slipped out through a side exit, unnoticed by the crowd, and emerged onto a quiet street. The valet tried to wave down a car, but Tessa declined. Instead, she flagged down one of the black town cars idling nearby. "Where are we going?" Roman asked as the driver pulled away from the curb. "I want to take you somewhere," she said, glancing out the window. "Someplace real." They drove across the city, past the glittering high-rises and into a neighborhood with old brick buildings and narrow streets. The car stopped in front of a cozy, two-story house with painted shutters and a cracked stone path leading up to the porch. Roman narrowed his eyes. "This is your place?" "Not anymore," she said, pushing open the car door. "It belonged to my grandmother. She left it to my mother, who couldn't keep it after Dad passed. I bought it back last year. I haven't told anyone." Roman followed her to the door. "Why me?" "Because you don't care about who I'm supposed to be. You just see me." She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. The walls were lined with shelves, and a worn armchair sat beneath the window. Roman paused in the doorway, Clara's absence suddenly noticeable in his chest. "She's at Mrs. Callahan's tonight," he said, answering the thought before she asked. "Neighbor across the hall. Loves her like her own." Tessa walked to the fireplace and lit a match, touching it to the stacked logs. A soft crackle filled the room. "My grandmother used to sit here and knit for hours," she said. "She told me stories about how she met my grandfather during the war, how they used to write letters back and forth for 2 years before they ever kissed." Roman stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "You believe in that kind of love?" "I used to think I did," she murmured. "Then I got older. And everything started to feel like a transaction." He sat on the edge of the couch. "And now?" Tessa turned to face him. "Now I'm not sure what I believe. But I know I don't want to go back to pretending." Roman leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You ever think about walking away from all of it?" "Every day." He watched the flames dance in the hearth. "So what stops you?" "My mother's name is on half the building I run. I tell myself I'm protecting her legacy, but sometimes I think I'm just scared." Roman nodded slowly. "Wanting to protect the people we love isn't weakness." She crossed the room and sat beside him. "What about you? What do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I want Clara to grow up feeling safe. I want her to know that she can ask questions and make mistakes and still be loved. And I want to stop feeling like I'm always one missed paycheck from losing everything." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Do you want more than that?" For a moment he said nothing. Then he turned to her. "I want to wake up next to someone who doesn't flinch when I tell the truth." Tessa's breath hitched. "And if that someone comes from a world you don't fit into?" "I don't care where she comes from," he said. "I care who she is when everything else is stripped away." The look in her eyes changed, deepened. She leaned in, and their lips met again, slower this time, with a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't ask for permission. When they pulled apart, she rested her head against his shoulder. "Stay a little longer." "I will," he said quietly, "but I've got work at sunrise. And a lunchbox to pack." She smiled against his shirt. "Let me come with you." He raised an eyebrow. "To the warehouse?" "Why not?" "Because it's not exactly catered." "I'm not looking for catering. I want to see your world." He studied her, noting the sincerity behind the offer. "All right, but you'll need real shoes." She laughed. "Deal." The next morning, Roman opened the passenger door of his truck, an old Chevy with faded paint, and watched as Tessa climbed in wearing jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers. "You're going to regret this," he warned. "Not a chance." They drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. As they pulled into the lot behind the warehouse, Roman glanced at her. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I've spent years in boardrooms pretending to care about things that don't matter. I think I can handle a few forklifts." Inside, The floor buzzed with motion pallets being moved, boxes stacked, radios blaring in the corners. Roman showed her where to stand, handed her a spare vest, and introduced her as a volunteer. He didn't miss the glances from the others, most of them curious, a few amused. But Tessa didn't flinch. She asked questions, lifted crates, and wiped sweat from her brow without a word of complaint. During the break, she sat beside him on an overturned bucket, sipping from a dented thermos he'd filled with coffee that morning. "You really do this every day," she said. 6 days a week. She looked at him. "You deserve better." He shrugged. "I've got Clara. That's better than most." She turned toward him, her voice soft. "What if I wanted to be part of that?" Roman's grip on the thermos tightened. "Are you saying that because you mean it, or because this is all still new?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I've never felt more sure about anything in my life." He studied her face. "You're not scared of how messy this could get?" "I'm terrified," she said. "But I'd rather be terrified with someone honest than feel safe with people who wear masks." Roman set the thermos down and reached for her hand. "Then let's stop pretending," he said. She nodded. No more pretending. And with that, a new kind of rhythm began, one that didn't belong to her world or his, but something entirely their own. The first snow of the season drifted down in soft flurries as Roman adjusted Clara's scarf and zipped up her coat outside the apartment building. Across the street, Tessa leaned against the sleek black sedan. She'd driven herself a small rebellion against her usual staff, insisting on handling everything. Clara bounded over to her, holding out a paper snowflake she'd cut out at school. "I made it for you," she said, her grin wide beneath her wool hat. Tessa crouched and accepted the wrinkled snowflake like it was made of gold. "It's perfect. Can I put it on my window?" Clara nodded. "You can tape it on the inside, so it doesn't blow away." Roman watched the exchange from the steps, his hands buried in his jacket pockets. Tessa looked up at him as she stood, the wind tousling her hair. "You ready?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "I still don't know about this." "You agreed, remember? One night, no excuses. I didn't think you meant a gala. I didn't think you'd say yes." Her smile was different tonight, gentler, almost uncertain. "I didn't say yes," he said as he made his way over. "I said I'd consider it. And you're here," she replied, opening the car door for Clara. "That's close enough." He gave her a sideways glance. "She's only going to the Callahans because Mrs. Callahan bribed her with brownies and that weird singing elf decoration. Then I owe Mrs. Callahan a thank you basket." As they drove toward the venue, Roman glanced out the window at the glittering city. "So, what's this thing for again?" Tessa fastened her seatbelt. "It's the annual winter fundraiser for the Literacy Foundation." "I'm on the board." "Of course you are." She turned her head. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "No," he said quietly. "Just means you care more than you let on." Tessa didn't reply, but her fingers curled slightly in her lap. When they arrived, the building was awash in silver lights and towering ice sculptures. Roman stepped out, eyes scanning the crowd as photographers swarmed the entrance. Tessa reached for his hand. "If at any point you're uncomfortable, we leave. No questions." He nodded once. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the ballroom was transformed, walls draped in white velvet, chandeliers wrapped in crystal garlands. A grand piano played in the corner, and servers moved silently with trays of wine and canapés. Roman straightened his collar, instinctively scanning the room with the posture of someone used to watching his surroundings, not being watched. Tessa led him toward a group at the far end, introducing him only by name. No one asked who he was beyond that, which was somehow worse. One of the older board members leaned in toward Tessa. "We were just discussing the new wing at the library. Are you still matching the grant?" "Yes," she said smoothly. "But I want the funds earmarked for underserved school districts." Roman looked at her, surprised by how firm her voice had become. A younger man nearby raised his glass toward Roman. "So, what do you do?" Roman met his gaze. "I've got a daughter. I try to make sure she eats every day. That keeps me plenty busy." There was an awkward silence before someone laughed too loudly. Tessa glanced up at him, her hand brushing his under the table. "Let's go outside," she whispered. They slipped onto the balcony, the cold air biting but welcome. Roman leaned against the railing, watching his breath fog in the air. "You didn't have to defend me in there," he said. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending myself." He arched a brow. "I'm tired of pretending I care what those people think. I spent years making myself small enough to fit into their expectations. Then you walked into my life and blew that to pieces." Roman chuckled. "I didn't do anything. You showed up. You stayed. That's more than most." He was quiet for a moment. "You ever think this thing it's too different to work?" Tessa turned to face him. "You think love needs matching resumes?" He shrugged.
"No.
"But I think it needs truth." "Then here's mine," she said, stepping closer. "I spent years chasing things that didn't fill the emptiness. But when I'm with you and Clara, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Roman searched her face. "Even if that means walking away from everything else." "I've already started," she said, her voice steady. "I sold my shares last week." His eyes widened. "You what?" "I'm done pretending I'm happy running a company I never wanted. I want to build something that matters. Something real." Roman stared at her, stunned. "That's huge." "So, is what I'm about to ask you." She pulled a small box from her coat pocket. Not velvet, not gold, just a simple wooden box with a carved lid. Roman opened it slowly. Inside was a slim, silver key. "What's this for?" "There's a house I bought, near a park with a big oak in the front yard. 3 bedrooms. Clara gets the one with a bay window." He blinked. "Are you saying?" "I want to build a life with you. A real one. Not in penthouses or on rooftops, but with midnight grocery runs and burnt toast and science projects spread out on the kitchen table." Roman didn't speak right away. His throat tightened. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." He looked down at the key, then at her. "You sure you're ready for that kind of mess?" "I'm ready for your mess," she said. "And Clara's. And the one we make together." He pulled her into his arms, the key still clenched in his hand. "Then let's go home." Later that night, as they walked up the steps to the new house, Clara asleep in Roman's arms, her breath warm against his shoulder, Tessa unlocked the door. Inside, the lights were already on. A plate of cookies sat on the counter. A welcome note from the realtor leaned against a vase. Roman set Clara down on the couch and turned to Tessa. "You really bought this place for us?" "No," she said, brushing her fingers against his cheek. "I bought it for what we're going to become." He kissed her then, slow and deep, as if sealing a promise neither of them had known they were capable of making before they met. And outside, the snow kept falling gently, quietly, as everything finally, beautifully, fell into place. The scent of fresh paint still lingered faintly in the air as Roman carried the last sealed box into the living room. The house was quiet aside from the gentle clinking of Clara setting out 3 mismatched mugs on the kitchen counter. She was humming under her breath, her curls tied up in a lopsided bun. Tessa stood at the doorway to the hallway, barefoot, her hair damp from the shower, wearing one of Roman's worn flannel shirts over leggings. She watched as he straightened and stretched his back. "You didn't have to carry the bookshelf by yourself," she said, crossing her arms. "You were halfway across town," he replied. "And I didn't feel like waiting. Besides, it wasn't that heavy." She raised a brow. "You grunted loud enough to wake the neighbors." He grinned, wiping his hands on a towel. "That was for dramatic effect." Tessa walked over and stole one of the mugs Clara had set out. "We should hire movers next time." There won't be a next time, Roman said, brushing a kiss against her temple. This is it. She leaned into him for a moment, then stepped back to help Clara pour hot chocolate. The girl concentrated with the seriousness of a scientist conducting a dangerous experiment. Roman watched the two of them and felt a strange warmth settle in his chest, not the kind that came from being comfortable, but the kind that came from knowing he was exactly where he was meant to be. Later that evening, after Clara had fallen asleep curled up with her new stuffed owl beside the window, Roman and Tessa sat on the back porch. The sky was clear, constellations scattered across the dark like secrets waiting to be uncovered. Tessa wrapped her arms around her knees and rocked slightly on the porch swing. "Do you think she's adjusting okay?" she asked. Roman nodded. "She talks about the yard more than cartoons now. That's usually a good sign. She told me she wants to plant strawberries in the spring." He smiled. "She'll make us build a fence to keep out imaginary squirrels." Tessa tilted her head. "You'll help her, right? You really think I'd say no to that?" She looked at him, her voice quieter. "No, I don't." They sat in silence for a while, the swing creaking gently beneath them. Then Tessa said, "I've been thinking about what comes next." Roman leaned his shoulder against the wooden slats. "You're not getting bored already, are you?" "No," she said with a small laugh. "I mean for me. I walked away from everything. It felt right. But I want to build something, too. Something that's mine." "What are you thinking?" "There's a community center near the East End. It's half-built. Lost funding last year. I've been talking to the people trying to keep it open. They need someone to help get it off the ground again. Programs for kids. Job training. Family support." Roman's expression shifted. "You want to run it?" "I want to help make it matter." "You'd be great at that," he said without hesitation. "You'd actually care." She looked at him, eyes shining. "I think I finally know what I want to do with all the pieces I used to think were useless." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You're not the only one figuring it out." Tessa looked over. "What about you?" "I talked to my supervisor at the warehouse. Told him I'd be stepping back. I've been taking night classes.
Construction design.
They've got an apprenticeship opening next month." She blinked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to be sure. I didn't want to just survive anymore. I want to build something, too. For us." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "You make me believe we can really have all of it," she whispered. "We already do," he murmured, pulling her into a kiss that was slow and certain. They stayed on the porch until the wind grew colder and the stars began to fade. Inside, the house was still, except for the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. Weeks passed. The garden was cleared. Clara planted a tiny sign where the strawberries would go come spring. Roman started his apprenticeship, coming home with dust on his clothes and blueprints rolled under his arm. Tessa met with the city council, secured funding, and reopened the center under a new name, the Alden Rivers Foundation. They didn't talk about marriage, not at first. It wasn't because they weren't ready, it was because everything already felt like a vow. Until one Sunday morning, when Clara, covered in pancake batter, looked at them across the breakfast table and said, very seriously, "So, when are we having a wedding?" Tessa choked on her coffee. Roman raised an eyebrow. "That's a big question, kiddo." Clara shrugged. "I already drew the invitations. I put glitter on yours." Roman looked at Tessa. "Well, I guess that settles it." Tessa reached across the table and took his hand. "Guess it does." They were married in the backyard that summer. Clara wore a flower crown and tossed rose petals from a basket that had once held her toys. The neighbors gathered, folding chairs scattered across the lawn. Roman wore a linen shirt and no tie. Tessa walked barefoot down the stone path, her dress simple, her smile radiant. There were no photographers. No limousines. No press. But there was music. laughter. A breeze that carried the scent of sun-warmed grass and the sound of Clara giggling with her friends. When Roman pulled Tessa into his arms for their first dance, she rested her head against his chest. "This is more than I ever dreamed." He kissed the top of her head. "This is just the beginning." That night, they stood at the window of their bedroom, watching Clara chase fireflies barefoot across the yard. Tessa leaned into him, her hand resting over his heart. "Promise me something. Anything. Whatever life throws at us, we never stop choosing this." He turned her hand over and kissed her palm. "Every single day." And they did. They chose it in the quiet mornings when the coffee burned and the toast popped too early. They chose it in the chaos of spilled cereal and forgotten permission slips. They chose it in laughter, in exhaustion, in the long, sweet hours of building something that had never needed to be perfect, just real. And so, they lived not in towers of glass or behind velvet ropes, but in a home filled with warmth, honesty, and a love that had been earned in the most unexpected way. Together. Always.